I know this sounds self-destructive, and a lot of people have said, "Oh, don't say that," you know, when I say it. But I've just decided that I've got to tell myself this is probably my last movie. You know, that no one will ever allow me to make another movie after this one, because it'll either be a piece of crap or it'll just be too self-indulgent or something. And a lot of people say, you know, they just say, "Oh, that sounds horrible, you know, why be so negative?" But actually, it's really liberating for me to say that to myself, because then I don't have to worry about upsetting anyone. I can be as mischievous as I want. Might be the last time I'll ever be mischievous, I don't know. It's just liberating to be self-destructive sometimes. It's my last movie.
The man you see before you is Guy Maddin. He rose from the fertile soil of the Winnipeg Film Group in the mid-1980s to direct some of the most exquisitely fervid films ever made. His first short and subsequent 3 features played at festivals around the world and secured him an international cult following. Now, using the art of collage, he is preparing a new project, Twilight of the Ice Nymphs, that could either propel him to the forefront of independent filmmaking or send him spiraling back into a humble career as a house painter. The last time Maddin reached the planning stages of a feature was for a film called The Dikemaster's Daughter. This project ended in miscarriage and collapse and instigated a spirit-breaking 4-year hiatus from feature filmmaking. Maddin's first film was the delirious family melodrama, The Dead Father. Since then, he's made 3 features in rapid succession, been catapulted into cult stardom, and became the youngest person ever to win the Telluride Lifetime Achievement Award. Joining such illustrious luminaries as Francis Ford Coppola and Gloria Swanson. Maddin's films recall the masterworks from the glory days of cinema. But the fact is, films like this have never, ever been made before.
The biggest thrill of my film career so far is that Careful played in Paris on the 100th birthday on December 28th, 1995. And I started thinking about this picture, which is going to have a lot of French symbolist painting styles worked into the art direction, and explicitly Gustave Moreau, and these guys were peaking in 1895 as well. So it's a great cusp time, the invention of cinema and French symbolist painting, and it just dawned on me that that's what's concurring, and so I love to be swimming in these 2 fluids for this picture. That's the banner under which I'm going to work from now on. It's just Moreau and the birth of cinema, and birth of movies.
Behold the Vulcan Ironworks, an abandoned foundry in Winnipeg's feared and beloved North End. The building gave birth to the famed Winnipeg General Strike of 1919, but now sits empty, waiting for Twilight to begin.
This big space has to be filled with some sort of theatrical beauty in 6 weeks. And frankly, I don't think it can be done. So I'm kind of scared about that. But my fears actually caused a circuit breaker to pop. Over here, I'm not going to make it, but there will be a massive cliff wall with a waterfall coming down here. And there'll be a little hill of Venus in tribute to Aubrey Beardsley. And in back of here, there'll be plenty of movement for a camera to dolly through while our characters make their way through the woodland as nymphs. And this is the bog of the underworld, you know, and well, actually what it really is just a big a pit where you dip things in and chrome plate them or something like that. But for my movie, our movie, I should say more generously, this will be a bog where almost each and every character, I believe, falls into at one point or another. And it's the bog of the great underworld. It's going to contain blood, milk, wine, sperm, crystal objects pushed up from beneath. And then it's only appropriate that each character must bathe in this stuff, and so that they're part of Mother Nature and timeless power of the gods that are now forced underground by Judeo-Christian order. It's a pit.
Camp Twilight is a summer camp set up by Guy Maddin Industries to keep 75 campers happy for the summer. People with various skin problems, skin diseases, who can't go outdoors. And so we've set up an arts and craft shop. We've set up a little swimming pond. We set up a beach. We've set up a forest, indoors, all indoors. No daylight will ever touch the fair skin of any resident of Camp Twilight. And that's true, that's the truth.
This is just a place that makes me feel at home. I instantly felt at home in this room. For some reason, it felt right. I don't know why, but and I have a little ritual already where I come in and hang up that and put on this and get down to work. So this is it. This is where I'm going to paint my storyboards because it's in color, and I have a little brush and I have paints, and see, I've even started storyboards already today. And I have a painting of Veli-Pekka Katola and Kenny Fryer Nicholson broadcasting from heaven. That's my daughter, my wife, and two little sisters. So there's some other people that are just very important to putting me in the mood for filmmaking.
One thing you can't do with Guy's movies, because he simply won't let you, is kind of lose yourself in the narrative. Just get so caught up in the drama that you forget, you suspend your disbelief. His films never allow you to do that. And I think that constant insistence that what you are watching is a movie, and the interest in the medium, and that all that sort of obsessive concern with archaic details and things from old forms of classical cinema, and reprocessing that is really Canadian. And I think that other filmmakers were working with more contemporary inspiration. Adam McGoyan was working with video at a certain point. David Cronenberg's interest was also in video and film, but Guy was one of the first to actually take it back to the origins of that medium. Where that inspiration actually comes from, I don't know.
This is Steve Snyder's old place. Those two windows at the bottom right, that was his living room in there. And this is where we used to get together probably once, twice, 3 times a week to watch videos and watch movies. And if there was a film school in Winnipeg in those days, this was it. This was it.
Well, in the late 1970s, Guy was living in this house, and I was living in a house right across the alley. And in those days, pre-videotape, I used to bring home 2 movies every weekend from the university. For screening, I had a projector in my living room and a great setup. And so Guy Mo would come over every weekend and we'd spend Friday or Saturday night drinking scotch and watching 2 feature-length films, and often, like recreating the dialogue so it would be better and stuff like that. Having a good time. This went on for years, yeah.
What he'd do is he'd project it onto the wall, he'd get out his video camera, he'd videotape it off the wall, and then he'd take that videotape on beta, he'd transfer it to 3/4 inch tape back at the university, then he'd take it home, and he had the 3/4 and his VHS, and he'd move it on to VHS. So then we'd watch a 5th generation bad library, 16mm library print of a 35mm film that he's shown at the university 18 times.
And John and Guy and I would sit and watch these films every weekend in that living room. And many times I'd go to bed and I'd wake up in the morning and they'd still be sitting there on the couch, blah, 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 yakking at each other. I'd have to get up and say, "Get out of here."
We just drank them down. We thought they were so entertaining, and we'd be watching them well into the wee hours of the morning, and it was just a really good time. I have oh, cut that. Fuck, I was going to start getting fucking all weepy about it.
We were all just a bunch of slackers in the late 70s anyways, early 80s. So like you didn't think about what someone was going to be because you didn't even know yourself what you were going to be, and yeah, I just sort of remember endless days of slacking. Hanging out in the University of Winnipeg cafeteria, staring at girls, and then picking one that we liked, and then following her around for the whole day. We're just like sort of stalking 101. For a brief period over the course of a year, I can't even remember what year it was, early 80s, we did a show on cable television called Survival. The theme of the show was surviving nuclear holocaust and or socioeconomic collapse. It was set up as a talk show, like the Johnny Carson of survivalism, and I was the host of the show. We basically just sort of bullshitted. We just sat there and pretended to be survivalists, wore masks. Guy on the show played a persona by the name of Concerned Citizen Stan.
The man whom I refer to with such vigor and such glee is a man you all know and love. A man by the name of Concerned Citizen Stan! Stan, welcome to the show!
Thank you, Trevor. Thank you for a very pretty introduction. I don't think I've quite ever been greeted like that before.
It's my pleasure, Stan!
Oh, it's certainly my pleasure, too.
It all ends up that you're eventually going to be making films. That's, I think, what slacking leads to. It's what else are you going to do with your time?
When Guy was a young man, his father, Chaz Maddin, once general manager and coach of Canada's national hockey team, suffered a fatal stroke, leaving his son pregnant with smoky, unresolved memories and the inspiration for a short film.
It partly got started because Guy's friend John Harvey wanted to make a film, and they must have talked about it. And about that time, I had been going to actual filmmaking school in San Francisco, and when I came back I had these films I'd actually made, which at that time amazed Guy that I could take a camera and make a film, right? If I could do it, he could do it. And so I screened these things and showed him how a camera works, and he said, "I can make a film too." So he got the script for The Dead Father, and we went up to Gimli, and I got a camera, and we loaded it right there. I showed him how to load it right there and how to use the light meter, and I did the first shot of the film for him. And after that, he was on his own. Here you go. It's all yours. Make a movie.
Days aflutter with the green of leaves. And the white of sympathy cards.
Dead Father is my very first film, and it's the only one that really seemed to come from anything true and autobiographical. Unfortunately, I didn't have any technical experience at the time, so it's, to most people, least successful by far. There I was simply trying to recreate the dreamlike feeling that is quite common to people who've lost a loved one or a pet, and they are often revisited by those deceased parties in dreams.
During these summer weeks, it became apparent that my father wasn't quite dead in the traditional sense. Brief recoveries became common. In a voice I can't remember, he would make various vague requests. I had nothing to do with this new fragile kind of life. If anything, I resisted the idea until I could resist it no longer.
When The Dead Father was finished, Guy took it to film professor George Tolles, who would go on to become Maddin's good friend and screenwriter.
And I was as stunned as I could be when the film was finally shown to me, that it was, I just felt unquestionably a work of astonishing ambition and complete originality, and with this, and just informed in every frame by a sensibility that was what I thought unique.
We shot The Dead Father, actually, the interiors were shot in his house on McMillan. And the scene that I was asked to do was to eat yogurt by the light of the refrigerator, and eat yogurt as if I didn't like it. So he showed me how, and actually there wasn't much acting to those films, as you probably know from seeing them. And he basically, there was no talking, no dialogue, it was shot completely silently. And he would pantomime what he wanted to do, you to do, and you just do what you saw. And I was supposed to take a spoon and eat it.
Dead Father, it was a case of him being inspired by John Pays, a local filmmaker who had a startling imagination and a love of artifice, a dry sense of humor, and a passion to do something singular under adverse circumstances.
And I'm surprised you've lifted your embargo on female company.
What words you use. Did you know that embargo spelled backwards is, grab me.
Guy basically watched, learned, queried John, and played the role of a nurse, a transsexual in drag in John's movie, The International Style.
Danny. Was it him?
Maybe. But later there were more. I heard more voices as I was coming to.
More? How many more? Male? Female?
I'm sorry, Miss Tanaka. I cannot remember. I do not know.
I thought Guy was terrific. When he's shoving Mitch into the furnace, the look of evil on his face is just supreme. It's a really great moment, and it's probably one of the best moments of the film.
Puck is back from the face-off.
I grew up with the Canadian national hockey team as a rink rat.
My dad used to lend me out to visiting teams as stick boy, and so my biggest memories are of the 1960s Soviet powerhouse teams. I was not just a stick boy, you know. Sure, I was that. I used to have to tape sticks and things, but I used to also get to slice up the oranges, and I guess squeeze the oranges into their open, thirsting mouths, and after the games, I'd get to lather up their backs in the shower.
Now the puck at center as they battle it across the line, but it's broken. The goal, center data went through the crease, and she picks it up.
I was only about this tall, and I can remember coming in here and meeting Gump Worsley at about this height, and he was all soapy and lathered up, and I recognized him from television, and you know, he gave me a little pat on the head, and then I got a job. Sort of, I just did it instinctively. I got to towel him off after, and later on, I got to lather up some of the players who were, you know, it was training camp, and they were still not that flexible. So I used to dry off parts of them they couldn't really reach all that well. Soviet players in those days seemed to be culled from a different part of what's now Russia. The Russian players now are very pretty and fine-featured, seem like they're out of some sort of Turgenev novel or something, but the Soviets in the 60s were these monobrowed, sullen, super Cro-Magnon types. Alexander Ragulin seemed impenetrable. Canadian players tried hitting him with blocks of wood and couldn't even elicit a grunt from him. The guys that I loved so much didn't wear helmets. They wore Brill Cream. And they didn't use sticks with brand names on them. They just used things that seemed to be like hacked out of a tree trunk.
One thing that I know Guy and I both shared was a love for the old Winnipeg Arena before they like chopped the roof off and put in the awful seats that you can't see anything from, and like replaced the Queen's picture, and it was just this dank, musty, wonderful old place. Well, barbershops were an obsession with Guy and Ian and myself. And there were all kinds of barbers that we tried over the years. Eventually, we discovered Bill, Bill the barber. Not only is his store oozing with atmosphere, Bill knew everything there was to know about silent films and silent film stars.
I grew up in a beauty salon. It was my second home besides the Winnipeg Arena. My very first memory is of this hair shoot where all the floor trimmings, hair, tissues, errant rollers, things like that were all swept by my Aunt Lil down into a hole in the baseboard into this chute. And I would sneak up into this chute and open the little hole in the baseboard and look in upon the ankles of all the mostly elderly female customers. And I'd sort of get off on the secrecy of this.
Well, this is the beauty shop here. This is the entrance to my apartment upstairs. This is the entrance to my sister's. She took over the small apartment at the bottom. This was Guy's bedroom right there at the back. I just loved it. It was huge. It was as big as a home. The kids loved it because they could use all three levels to play hide and go seek and whatnot. It was fantastic. The kids were actually mad at us when we decided to retire and sell it.
cast adrift from Lil's beauty salon, Guy shacks up with his college pal Klimq in an apartment across the lane from Professor Snyder. Guy and Greg quickly become Winnipeg's own odd couple, with the emphasis on odd.
Unless Guy is lying to me, he claims that I was the best roommate he ever had.
I remember being so relieved to get a new roommate, Greggy, and I should have known things were going to turn out oddly, because on the very first night he plunked down at the TV at the foot of the couch, and he just lied down on the couch, lit up a cigarette, and promptly fell asleep, and the lit cigarette rolled between his thighs and set his pants on fire.
It was just a joy living with Guy because, you know, the place was always spotless. It was always clean. He would pick up after me. I didn't ever have to worry about, you know, if I, you know, had a bag of chips and I just threw it on the floor, he'd pick it up and put it in the garbage.
No matter what I did, he kept the kitchen very scummy, so I decided to seal off the kitchen like a ghetto, and until things were just crawling out of it, and the rest of the apartment was neat as a pin.
I suspect that maybe at a certain point, Guy may have thought that I might just go ahead and do the dishes myself, but I never did.
Back at Camp Twilight, shooting has begun.
Thanks everybody for delaying lunch. We won't even bother coming around.
I used to kind of like the feeling it was just me against the world, and the few people that were helping me were very kind to put up with my arrogance because I wouldn't even let them in on what I was making usually, you know. Especially the actors, you know, they'd say, well, what do you want me to do in this shot? And I'd say, never mind, I just took the shot. It's finished, you know. They go, what? And, you know, and these are people who've been to acting school, and I've just finished filming them chatting with each other, and I'll dub in some sounds later, and, you know, it's kind of maltreating them. And now I'm working with actors with considerably bigger reputations, and I'm going to have a rehearsal period with them. And I guess what could happen is they all seem like nice people, but some of them could just take the picture away from me, I guess, and start acting it in a style that I don't like. I think it's a miracle whenever a picture turns out really well. There are so few great pictures. All it really takes is one or two elements to go wrong, and a picture stinks.
Actors have flown in from the four corners of the world, increasing the chances of the mainstream success that Maddin both fears and craves.
He takes reality and gives it a resonance that's poetic and that kind of concentrates and crystallizes reality in a way that we don't generally experience it. And to me, that's what filmmaking should really be about, not literal, linear, consecutive stuff that happens to us every day. It's only really worth watching if it takes reality and somehow crystallizes it or heightens it into a place where we understand something more about being alive. And that's what Guy does. And it's an extraordinary gift.
Everything is so creative. Everything is so unique. And I think Guy is just a little kid there in the middle of that playground and want to share it with everybody there. So I think it's the first time I've experienced this kind of chemistry. And I think Guy is working with his family, you know. I think he would never go away to make his movie. He wants to do it here in Winnipeg with his family. And who knows, maybe in 20 years we're gonna say, oh, yeah, I'm going to Winnipeg to do a Guy Maddin movie.
You know, I was at a conference once in Montreal, and some guy stood up and said, Winnipeg is the center of art in Canada. And I thought, that's a very interesting comment. I never found out why he said that, but some people apparently think so. If it's true, it has to do with the utter barren isolation of this place.
Well, Winnipeg is a very cold and flat and sort of empty-looking city. And within that, there is the great warmth and there's great fire and there's a lot of, I sort of spent a week with the Winnipeg Film Group years before this once, because it interested me too that out of this vast wasteland comes all this fire, you know, and originality.
John Pays has said this, Guy Maddin has said it too, that since it was so dangerous or treacherous to go outside, one spent a lot more time inside finding something to do.
Where the hell is Winnipeg? Who the hell would live in Winnipeg? Why the hell would anyone make movies in Winnipeg?
It's very possible to grow up here and spend your entire life here without ever leaving the place. I was quite content with my place in the world, which was curled up in bed listening to faraway radio stations being broadcast beneath layers of static that would somehow drift in. The receptions would drift in and out as the curtains of static parted briefly in the celestial breezes and things. So I had a very exotic childhood living here in complete privation, as it turns out. I found out later. And my use of sound in the movies had to replicate that feeling that I was being tucked in by a big audio mama at night beneath layers of comforting, itchy blankets of sound.
Tales from the Gimli Hospital, I just come through an intense male jealousy situation, male rivalry thing, and I just noticed the peculiar ways it manifested itself in me, where I was actually quite often forgetting the object of the jealousy that I had and concentrating on the male rivalry. And my rival was mine. No one else was allowed to have this person as a rival, and I became possessive.
Gimli's Saga was the original title of Guy's first feature. Gimli, a small Icelandic community north of Winnipeg in which Maddin's ancestors first settled, was the scene of horrific calamity in 1876 when a smallpox epidemic killed a large segment of the population. Guy, to the consternation of the present-day Gimliites, used this event as the starting point for his story, and he took it to the realm of dark, absurdist comedy.
And it was like, well, doing the unimaginable, talking about the epidemic which had caused horrific casualties to so many of his ancestors and family members, but to make a comedy out of epidemic and pestilence without at the same time losing a kind of below the comedy darkness.
What people seem to sometimes miss is the incredible emotional core to his films, the beauty of tragedy, and that is something that you find in all of his films.
Tragedy became a part of Guy's emotional makeup at an early age, when an epidemic of a different sort descended upon his neighborhood. A plague of suicides haunted the Maddin family and their acquaintances, culminating for Guy in the death of his 16-year-old brother, Cameron, who was found sprawled across the grave of his recently deceased girlfriend. Deprived of a friend and beloved paladin, Guy became infused with a true and deep feeling for the power of melodrama.
At one point, he showed me a rough cut of the film in my capacity at the film group, and I was like completely and utterly blown away. I realized there and then that there was some sort of occult potential for it.
The image of Kyle McCullough sprucing himself up by oiling his hair with a fish that he squeezes over his head, and there are great drops of fish oil that drop into his hair. And that was an image that for me was at once grotesque and compelling, but also screamingly unusual and funny. It was in seeing that image that this whole thing came together, that I realized now that I was watching the work of someone who was unlike any other filmmaker I'd ever seen.
The career of Tales from the Gimli Hospital started slowly, with a rejection from the Toronto Film Festival. Producer Klimke capitalized on this, however, proclaiming hither and yon the unfairness of this big city treatment of a small prairie film. These tactics brought Gimli Hospital perhaps more publicity than if it had played the festival after all. Picked up by cult impresario Bernd Barenholtz, whose magic touch had previously been applied to a racerhead and pink flamingos, the film played for nearly a year at the Quad Cinema in New York's Greenwich Village and toured the world.
I'm gonna cross.
I try to keep things childish on the set because I like movie making to feel like a child feels like when he or she is just absent-mindedly cutting up pieces of paper or pieces of food and gluing them onto one big piece of manila tag or something, and just totally unaware of how much time is passing, just playfully inventing stuff. So I always wanted filmmaking to be like that. Of course, as crews get bigger, it isn't, you know, there's a lot of people asking you, where should I glue the noodle? Should I put it here or there? Where does it look better?
35 Hotel, take 3.
Is it all right if I say I swear this is it instead of I could swear this is it?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, how was the reveal there?
Expensive modern equipment, a large professional crew, and experienced actors are supposed to make things easier. But in the end, it's all a question of what you're used to.
So shall we go twice?
The burden of dreams is just as heavy on the prairies.
Oh, what the hell do I know about that sort of thing? What do I know? I'm a gelding, remember? Who ripped his manhood open on a what is it? Chair nail. I ripped his manhood open on a chair nail half a century ago. What do I know about such things?
I didn't come into this picture with very much power, very much personal clout. I was very lucky to make it. So much was imposed upon me. I feel that I've made the entire thing in shackles, and it's just very frustrating. Just close the mausoleum lid on me. I don't really feel like working on movies anymore.
Can anything sink the bloodlust of these barbaric children?
My friend John Harvey gave me the idea for Archangel. He told me about this great place in Russia where after World War I ended, everyone seemed to have a collective amnesia and forget that the World War was over.
Goodbye, Iris.
Archangel, of course, was a little-known chapter in Canadian history where the Canadian Army intervened in the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. Not just the Canadian Army, but almost all the armies of the world intervened there. The Senegalese Army, what was a special corps of the Yugoslavian Army, the American Army, the French Army, the British Army. They all intervened in Archangel, which is probably the most northerly port in Russia. They dumped huge munitions stockpiles there, and they were going to use that as their base to wipe out communism. Of course, it was very ill-considered and in the end a tragic episode. But I thought a very fascinating story. Sort of have parallels between the futility of this intervention into the Russian Revolution with the futility of this protagonist's attempts to basically conquer the female lead.
Where there was war, there was her home.
In the movie Archangel, which I can barely remember making, I know there's an episode where a bunch of bunny rabbits start avalanching in on the characters, and I guess what I was, I think, trying to go for there was a bunch of characters in love with each other, all snuggled up into trenches, They're either fighting a war, or they're playing hide and go seek, or they're dressed up in their parents' clothes, or they can't remember what, and then an avalanche of bunnies comes, and that doesn't quite seem right, but it's delightful to them. And then, because it's so delightful, something kicks in that something must be wrong, just like food that tastes too good must be bad for you. This delightful little digression serves as a portent of something bad, and next thing you know, evil Teutons are charging in.
Archangel is a film which is a very baffling film for a lot of people. It's an incredibly baffling film. But I remember when we were doing the interlock for the film. The interlock is that point in the filmmaking process where it's basically the first time you see picture and all of your sound all up there for the very first time. And it's like when you're seeing the film for real. I remember just feeling goose flesh and chills. And I know Guy was feeling it too, and we both acknowledged to each other that we were feeling it. And whatever we'd done before, whatever we do after, at the very least, we've created this. And we felt that in fact, this was a film that was going to last.
I love Archangel. I wouldn't change a frame of it, but audiences certainly found it mostly, to the extent that we had audiences, a difficult go.
When people like Guy actually stop operating or getting the chance to make films, that also means the death of the cinema. These people are very essential. They keep the spark going, the ingenuity, the possibility of film. When you realize that this medium, the greatest gifts to the century we live in, that can record our movements across the earth, that can record our hearts and the way we express it. The actual potential of the medium, once you've recognized that there is some sort of God at work, you cannot let it rest. You make a film that somehow at least attempts at trying to penetrate the human psyche or expose it a little, instead of just doing another bit of entertainment.
With the success of Archangel, Guy's name became synonymous with 1920s style cinema. But given his druthers, this won't last for long.
I feel a bit like a time traveler going into a new area, and I don't really understand the manifestos. I haven't had them read out loud to me yet. And so I can only do my best to bluff my way around, and every now and then I feel I'm passing. And other times I'm not really too sure, so I am wandering around a little bit. But I'm hoping that during the shoot I find a new style, a departure, an evolution. I'm forcing myself to evolve. I'm tired of the 20s already. I've hung around in the 20s longer than the 20s hung around in the 20s, so it's time to move to a different place. I guess ultimately I'd like to make a movie that just takes the guts right out of you, that feel like you've been filleted or something after. And that's my goal with the movie. I have come nowhere near to doing that yet.
Okay, cut.
Head of Venus.
Well, I do have a neurological disorder, actually. It's great. My nephew gave me his cold once, and instead of just, getting a cold like you normally do in your nose or in your throat, your sinuses, I got one in my spine, and it went into my brain. And this is just after making my movie Archangel a few years ago. And it resulted in very harmless symptoms, but I constantly feel like I'm being touched by a ghost, and at random places, and I can never tell where. Any part of my body is susceptible to this feeling. The tip of my tongue even will every now and then get grabbed by a pair of invisible fingers. My bicep will get clenched in the dark or in broad daylight. Someone will caress my thigh, and I know not who. It's being treated with medication, which I'm coming down off of because the medication has too many sleepy side effects, and I really don't like being that sleepy. So the ghosts are visiting more frequently as I come down off this stuff. And I kind of just decided to go with it, you know, and just to be accompanied with this fleet of strangers whose lineaments I'll never completely discern. Just use them as some sort of consultant when I'm moving the camera over to one place. If I feel someone stop me with a palm on my chest, I'll know, put it right there.
I made my first trip to the West Coast ever and saw mountains and realized I want to make a movie about mountains, as if it had never dawned on anyone before. And George Tolles wanted to make a pro-incest movie. And so we compromised and made a pro-incest movie set in the mountains.
The pandemonium of everyone everywhere suddenly declaring all at once, and I too was molested by my father or my mother. I too have recovered memories which have basically obliterated my chances of any kind of comfortable adult sexuality, and so it seemed at that moment almost unthinkable to slant a movie, even going back into the German Romantic past when incest was almost a common theme. To slant it comically, and yet still somehow catch the feverish horror of incest in the net, if you like. It was only when the idea of the alpine world, where extreme caution was required for all behavior, where there was a kind of silencer on everyone's libido and behavior.
Children, heed the warnings of your parents. Peril awaits the incautious wayfarer, and strews grief where laughter once played.
When that was factored in, then I could see the green light in Guy's eyes. Once he had the word careful, it was there all at once.
The passions grow on high mountains and fling their red blossoms to the storm. Perhaps the boy has mountain fever. It begins innocently enough with dreams of mountains, a peak round as a plump knee, or a crest like a frosted bosom, white as goat's milk. Who can resist the temptation to climb? Into the folds one swoons. The rocks will catch you in a piercing embrace. There is something terrible about mountains. When the wind passes over anything else in nature, long grass or flowers, there is a brief agitation, an anxious stirring, and then the wind passes away as if it had never been. With mountains, it is different. Look at the ripples and wrinkles on the rock. The fearful passage of the wind is etched in the very stone, like a scream that never ends.
Guy has a real thing for the notion of sexuality breeding psychosis and becoming a disease, and he has great feel for all of the various ins and outs in this disease. He's a great pathologist, Dr. Maddin.
One of the most amazing experiences was when Careful premiered at the New York Film Festival. I remember one night, you know, sort of standing on the steps of Lincoln Center, and there were actual scalpers out there. sitting in the theater and listening to 1,600 people laughing is a pretty uplifting experience. And then there was this reality of the film actually opening theatrically in Toronto, in Canada, its big theatrical launch. And I remember at one point, coming back from New York feeling higher than a kite, and from the airport, Guy and I standing in the airport, me phoning our distributor to get our opening weekend grosses, and the distributor giving us the grosses, and at first my saying, yeah, you're just joking, yeah, okay, what are the grosses? He said, I'm not joking, they're that bad, and the film is coming off, it's only playing a week, it's a complete and utter disaster.
Things went from bad to worse as Guy and his producer Greg Klimke attempted what would be perhaps their last collaboration.
Well, George Tolles and I wrote this script, Dikemaster's Daughter. It was set in Winnipeg, but since I know no one in the world knows anything about Winnipeg, Winnipeg was sort of a boggy lowland occupied by two demographic groups largely, dike-making navvies and opera industry workers. It was going to be an operetta, very melodramatic horror story, but with singing and music and opera in it, and lots of aquatic storms and a big dam breaking and only women surviving. And I'd been fired up by watching a lot of Abel Gance movies, the master of French polyvision. He made Napoleon, and with really simple in-camera effects in many ways, and I was ready to mount this big egomaniacal spectacle, and I really did feel it was a step forward, and nothing I said could convince, unfortunately, that's just the way it goes, Telefilm that it was not a lateral move.
I think it's such bullshit, that whole business of lateral moves. I think that's like total bullshit.
It's a hard country in which to have those kinds of ambitions, in which to have those kinds of gifts.
Why a little bit of money? What crap, meanwhile, has been made all over the place? Why wasn't that film made? Why was he not given the money? What's $1 million? And the magic people like that can create with $1 million. That's the cocaine budget for most of those idiotic blockbusters,
There was far more dialogue, there was far more music, they were dovetailing. I was getting some higher profile actors, even some mythological performers to come in. To me, Christopher Lee and Leni Riefenstahl, Leni Riefenstahl acting comeback would have been nuts, but they gave me only as much money as I got for Careful, and I should be grateful to get that, but unfortunately I had already pitched the project at such a budget, and it was impossible to make it at half that amount at that stage, so the whole thing just fell apart. I still have the script sitting there, waiting to be made someday, when the zeitgeist demands, just that combination of stuff. I'll be sure to miss my timing and wait another 5 years and then make it. I don't know. That wasted about a year of my life. And then I made a short film that just took me a couple months to make for the BBC, a tribute to the Belgian lithographer Odilon Redon. And that was a lot of fun. I just made that as if it was my very first movie. Made it with some friends, had complete freedom of expression, could put whatever I wanted on the screen, and did so. So that was very liberating. It felt good to get behind a camera again, scrape the rust off my eyeball. It enabled me to get the courage up to make another picture, like this one.
I'd like to see Guy with $5 million, which by Hollywood standards is a low-budget film. Cable television films are made for about that amount. He is so resourceful, and I think he's been forced to be more creative and more inventive because of it not having any money. I mean, he went out there with a handheld light and was making films with a little Bolex camera and one light. I mean, that takes dedication.
I don't know, lately I've been thinking about, I found myself making plans to make another movie. So I don't know if this retirement is so. It may be enforced upon me, but I think I'm going to try to make another movie. I know what it is. It's when I was editing, the mistakes I made as a director were so painful that I was dying to actually get out there and correct them and direct again. And I found myself wishing out loud to my fellow editor, Reg, that I could just be out there right now directing another movie while he edited this one, and we got this one out of the way.
Well, looks like the pixie dust has been carted away in dump trucks, and the Vulcan Iron Works becomes once again a cold, empty shell.
Okay, so take one.
This might have been the day we first knew we loved each other. And my kissing you now would not have meant goodbye.
When it's time to re-record all the dialogue, as is customary on Guy's films,
Not bad. Okay,
he gets to direct in the way he likes best, calmly, intimately, and without ever getting up from his easy chair.
Just in the last few days, the picture's gotten very delirious for me. It seems to be working. And I've literally lost my balance a bit. I feel dizzy. And the spell is intoxicating. And it feels like a real movie all of a sudden. And I'm actually getting proud of it. And I can't get out of it right now. So I don't know how long that'll last. Probably not very long. But I'm going to allow myself the treat of swooning for a few days in this thing, and maybe a week if I'm lucky, and just feel good. I just don't have much balance. When I get out of bed, I bump into the fireplace and then scrape my arm on a doorknob or something, but it's a good feeling. Twilight, I always liked that word. Always. That's why it's found its way in eventually into the title of one of the film projects. And I like the idea of twilight, of everything being gray. Sidney Falco in Sweet Smell of Success is accused by J.J. Hunsaker of living in moral twilight. And I like the idea of characters in movies living in moral twilight all the time, where you're coherent enough to speak to someone, but you might not remember what you said, where you're mobile enough even to commit a crime, but it's a crime that your heart wills, but your mind would never allow you to do. So I guess I've always just liked Twilight, and I've always, since picking up a camera and deciding I wanted to create little tingles in people, it was the tingles that come from experiencing life's little moments of twilight that I wanted to create on the screen and then recreate in the people facing the screen, watching what I've made. So that's what I'm waiting to do.
We ready, Joe? There's one life belong. Okay.
Way out upon the waves you will hear the sound of CJOB at 680. The best in Winnipeg.
Maroons will return January the 8th. That's a week Sunday from a series of games against the Czechoslovakian club.
Hello? Yes? Is this SC for Victory 36731? Sunset 36731. Thank you. A call from Bratislava. Go ahead, please. Charlie?
I just wanted to say Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Hey, Dad. I got the tape recorder on the telephone.
You got the tape recorder.
Happy New Year.
Thank you, Cam. How's the little guy?
Just fine. He misses you too.
I'm having trouble hearing.